what's going on? Today I'm going to show you guys how to install one of the most important pieces of gear that you can bring with you when you go out exploring. A fire extinguisher. Last thing you want is to be out in the middle of nowhere and all of a sudden have your engine start smoking up and have no other choice other than to sit there and watch your truck burn to the ground. For the last few years, I've brought this one everywhere with me. However, it's always been bounced around inside the cab and never really secured in one spot. That's why in this video, we're going to show you how to mount it up front with you with one of these quick releases. This is a really simple install. All we're going to need is a little piece of steel, some hardware to bolt it on, sandpaper, paint, some snips. We're going to be using the Drake off-road quick release bracket. This is good for flashlights or fire extinguishers, maybe even one of those smaller shovels it would work out pretty well with. You're also going to need a pair of hose clamps. Sadly, they did not come with the kit, but those are pretty cheap enough, only a few bucks. A typical place to mount a fire extinguisher right in front of the passenger seat. Luckily for me, there's a nice flat spot right here in the floor where I can just simply make a bracket that goes from one bolt all the way down to the other without having any form of bends or have to get fancy with the bracket at all. So it looks like I'm gonna need to make this bracket about 14 and a half inches should do it. And about 1.5 inches tall, and we should be good. So now back to our steel. We line it up at 14 and a half by 1.5 inches. Get right here. And that will be our corner. So we're gonna take our snips and slice away. I actually made multiple lines, so as I'm cutting, I can make sure that I'm still on that 1.5 inch mark. Okay, so now we got it all cleaned up. No sharp corners to stab ourselves on. We still have these giant burrs on the edges from where we cut it, as well as have to give it more of a rough surface for the paint to adhere to. I'm using 100 grit sandpaper, but realistically, anything below 250 will pretty much get you there. If you have one, a good bet is always using a wire wheel or even a grinding wheel. Get those harder edges. Alright, they're my old firefighting gloves, but it'll do. Next thing we're gonna do is hit it with the grinding stone to clean up all these rougher edges. Alright, so this is where I plan on mounting the bracket. So the first thing we gotta do is get these seat bolts off. Now I made this bracket a little bit bigger than I had to, but I figured it would look a lot nicer if it was a thicker material, as well as giving the quick release more room if I had to mount it a little bit higher or a little bit lower. So you gotta make sure you're covering up both the holes with a decent amount of material. And the rough part is you really just gotta eyeball something like this, unless you're able to take the seat rail off. Alright, now I got the bracket set up into a little setup I have here. Wired here is just a simple 4x4 with a C-clamp to hold this piece of wood down, because the last thing you want is to be drilling into this, have it catch, and all of a sudden this turns into a blade and chops your fingers off. Next step is to take that bracket with the marks that you just made and start drilling out the holes for the seat mounts. Alright, so I just drilled my pilot holes. I did make two because this is a much flatter edge than the other side, so when I went to go line it up on the bracket to check for my clearance, it sits a lot nicer this way than it does that way. So in order to have better fitment, I also have to deal with having some extra holes on here, but that's not really the end of the world. So once you got your pilot holes all drilled out, you can go and hit it with a bigger bit to get the right size for this seat bolt. Alright, so we got that hole done. However, it is still not big enough for the bolt that holds in our seat rails, so we're gonna have to hit it with a bigger bit. Now we take our bracket, line it up to see how we did. Always, when you're putting in bolts, you want to start them by hand. Alright, seems like they fit. Awesome. That's on there, sturdy. Well, sturdy enough at least for a fire extinguisher. The mount that I'm using is by Drake Off-Road. It's good for flashlights, fire extinguishers, anything really in that size that you don't want to be bouncing around inside your truck. It's all billet, all aluminum. Comes with a little pull tab. Pull on that. Now that it's time to mount the bracket, we're first going to have to dress it using a fire extinguisher and a couple hose clamps. That way we're going to be able to see where this fits and what kind of clearance we're working with. Installation is very, very simple. Hose clamps go on. Definitely going to be able to trim the excess down the line. To mock these things up, all you have to do is just tighten down the hose clamps. Snug them up. And now that's on there for a little bit of play, we're able to hold up to the bracket and see what we're working with. Now it's time to check the clearance. Basically what we're trying to figure out now is where we want to mount this as far as left or right, and if we want to flip this to face it the other way. Something that I knew from the start was that this release is right next to where the lever is to move the seat forward and backwards. And although it looks like when it's all the way forward, it does clear, I don't want to be scraping up against that. So what I think I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take this off, flip the fire extinguisher around, so that way I can bring this bracket as far over as I can. Alright, now I got this mounted the way I want it, which is great because now I can put it all the way over here and it completely clears the lever you use to move the seat forward and backwards, as well as bringing the pull knob to release the fire extinguisher way closer to the driver's seat. Alright, now to mount the holes that we need for drilling. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get my China marker, and I'm going to drag a line right up top so I know where the bottom piece is sitting. Pop this off. So now I have a much smaller piece to work with and I don't have the full fire extinguisher in my way. I can go and line this right back up to where it was. And again, these things are awesome. If you don't have them, get them. I can mark my holes. And now it's off to go drill. So once you get your pilot holes drilled, you have to step up to whatever bit size you have to match your hardware. In my case, I have some 1/4 inch bolts, so I'm going to go with a 1/4 inch size drill bit. So I just threw some spray paint on real quick. Now it's time to mount the quick release. So we got our hardware ran through the bracket. Slip right on through, and then we're going to go get some hardware. And because I was not raised by savages, I use a washer, lock washer, and then a nut on both sides to make sure that this does not shake loose when you're off-roading or riding on the racetrack, whatever it is that you do. I also threw a little bit of paint on both of the seat bolts just to try to neaten it up a little bit. Now that we got the bracket all done, it's just a matter of reinstalling the OEM bolts for the seats. And then go to your favorite dentist and ask to borrow his tools. Alright, so the bracket is on, the bolts are torqued down. Nothing left to do now other than install the bracket. Alright, the quick release is all done, it is all mounted. You can still see the gauge perfectly. You have access to the release. I'm very impressed with this, it seems very sturdy. It leaves plenty of room for the passenger's feet. And it's right by the driver's seat if I ever need to grab it in case of emergency. Help myself, my buddy, or anyone else. Hope you guys enjoyed this install. If you guys have any questions, comments, or concerns, drop them below. Please subscribe and have a good one.